The desert wind carried more than dust that evening. It carried the scent of trouble and the weight of a woman's desperate hope. Caroline May Harper pressed herself against the weathered wall of the last building before the lawless frontier, her heart hammering beneath the torn bodice of her once fine dress. 3 days of hard riding had left her looking nothing like the schoolteacher she'd been in Silver Creek. Now she was just another shadow in a town full of them, with wanted posters bearing her likeness tacked to every post from here to Albuquerque. She touched the bruise on her wrist where Thomas Aldrich had grabbed her that final night. The wealthy landowner's hands had been rough, his breath sour with whiskey, his intentions clear despite her protests. When she'd pushed him away and he'd fallen, cracking his head on the marble hearth of his own study. She'd known no one would believe the truth, not when the richest man in 3 counties lay dead and she stood there with his blood on her hands. The coins in her pocket clinked softly, barely enough for a meal. Certainly not enough to buy safe passage across the border. But she had one currency left, one promise she could make that might be worth more than gold to the right man. The thought made her stomach turn, but survival had a way of rewriting a woman's principles. The saloon door hung crooked on its hinges, yellow light spilling onto the dusty street like fool's gold. Caroline could hear the tinny piano, the rough laughter, the clink of glasses. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to find another way. But there was no other way. The law would catch up by morning, and Judge Aldrich Thomas's brother had already promised she'd hang without trial. She straightened her spine, smoothed her dusty skirts, and pushed through the door. The music stopped. Every head in the place turned to stare at her, a woman alone, clearly running from something, walking into a den of outlaws and drifters. The bartender, a man with arms like tree trunks and eyes like a rattlesnake, paused mid-pour. "We don't serve your kind here, miss," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't talking about ladies. Caroline lifted her chin. "I'm not here for whiskey. I need someone who knows the border trails, someone who can get me across alive." A few men chuckled. One, sitting at a corner table with greasy hair and fewer teeth than fingers, called out, "What's it worth to you, pretty thing?" She met his gaze steadily. "Everything I have." "And what might that be?" Another man stood, younger, with the kind of smile that had probably charmed plenty of foolish girls. "'Cause from where I'm standing, you don't look like you got much." Caroline's hands trembled, but her voice stayed firm. "I have a promise, my word, and something more valuable than money to the right man." The younger man stepped closer, and she could smell the stale beer on him, see the calculation in his eyes. Now what could a desperate woman possibly— "That's enough." The voice came from the back corner, low and quiet, but cutting through the noise like a blade. Caroline turned to see a man she hadn't noticed before, sitting alone in the shadows. He was tall, she could tell, even seated with shoulders that filled out his worn leather duster. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but she caught a glimpse of a scar running along his jaw, and eyes the color of winter sky. The younger man backed off immediately. "Didn't know she was spoken for. Calder." "She's not." The man called Calder stood slowly, like a big cat unfolding. "But you're done talking to her." It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. The younger man retreated to his table without another word. Calder Boone stepped into the light, and Caroline got her first good look at him. He was older than she'd first thought, maybe 35 to her 23, with lines around his eyes that spoke of too many days squinting into the sun. His face was weathered but not unkind, hard but not cruel. The scar she'd noticed ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, pale against his sun-darkened skin. "You need to get across the border," he said. It wasn't a question. Caroline nodded. "Yes. Tonight. As soon as possible. I can't—" She swallowed hard. "I can't stay here." He studied her for a long moment, taking in the quality of her dress beneath the dust and tears, the way she held herself despite her fear, the bruise on her wrist she kept trying to hide. "You're the schoolteacher from Silver Creek, the one they say killed Thomas Aldrich." Her blood ran cold, but she kept her chin up. "Are you going to turn me in?" "Did you kill him?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Caroline could lie, make up some story about innocence and false accusations, but something in those pale eyes told her he'd know. "He's dead because of me," she said quietly. "But not the way they're saying." Calder nodded once, as if that answered everything. "Border's 2 days' ride through Apache territory. 3 if we're careful. Trail's dangerous even without someone chasing you." "I know. I don't work for free." Caroline's hands clenched in her skirts. This was the moment. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I have $7. It's all the money I could grab when I ran. That won't even cover supplies." She took a shaky breath. "I know, but I can offer... if you get me across safely, I could..." The words stuck in her throat like thorns. She'd been raised proper, taught that a woman's virtue was her most precious possession. But virtue wouldn't keep a noose from her neck. "Spit it out," Calder said, not unkindly. Caroline squared her shoulders and spoke quickly before she lost her nerve. "If you get me across the border alive, I'll give you my first night on the other side. You'll have my company. For 1 night. Whatever that means to you." The saloon had gone quiet enough to hear the wind rattling the windows. Caroline's cheeks burned, but she held Calder's gaze. Several men whistled low, and someone muttered something crude that made her stomach turn. But Calder's expression didn't change. He studied her for another long moment, then pulled out a chair at his table. "Sit." She sat, aware of every eye in the place on them. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses, pushed one toward her. "Drink, you look ready to faint." Caroline had never tasted whiskey in her life, but she took a sip. It burned, but it also steadied her nerves. "I don't take payment like that," Calder said quietly. "Not from desperate women who don't have choices." Her heart sank. "Then you won't help me." "Didn't say that." He knocked back his whiskey in one swallow. "Said I don't take that kind of payment. Your word's good enough." "My word. You promised to do something for me if we make it across. Don't matter what it is yet. When the time comes, I'll collect. Might be in a year, might be in 10, but you give me your word you'll do it, whatever it is, and I'll get you across." Caroline stared at him. An open-ended promise to a stranger was dangerous, but less dangerous than what she'd already offered, and far less dangerous than staying here. "Within reason," she said carefully. "I won't hurt anyone, won't break the law." "Fair enough." He stood, tossed coins on the table. "We leave in an hour. Get yourself some food and water. There's a woman runs the boarding house 2 doors down. Tell her Calder sent you. She'll let you clean up and get some traveling clothes." "I don't have money for..." "Tell her I sent you," he repeated. "Meet me at the livery stable when the church bell chimes 10. He turned to go, then paused. "And miss that promise you tried to make. Don't go offering that to anyone else. Next man might not be so understanding." He walked out, leaving Caroline sitting at the table with a glass of whiskey and the strangest feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd found the one honest man in a town full of thieves. The bartender appeared at her elbow. "You best do what he says. Miss, Calder Boone's a hard man, but he keeps his word. If he says he'll get you across, you'll get across." "Is he safe?" The bartender laughed, but not unkindly. "Safe? No man in this territory's safe, miss, but Calder's got his own code. He won't take what ain't freely given, if that's what you're asking." Caroline stood on shaky legs. 1 hour. In 1 hour, she'd trust her life to a stranger with ice-blue eyes and a scar that spoke of violence. But what choice did she have? Behind her lay certain death. Ahead lay uncertainty, but at least it came with a chance. She left the saloon and headed for the boarding house, unaware that she'd just made a bargain that would change not just her life, but her heart. The desert wind still carried dust and danger, but now it carried something else, to the faintest whisper of hope. The church bell had just finished its 10th chime when Caroline arrived at the livery stable, her appearance transformed. The boarding house woman, Mrs. Garrett, had been kind but knowing, providing her with a split riding skirt of worn brown cloth, a man's shirt that had seen better days, and a leather vest that might stop the worst of the desert wind. Her fine shoes had been replaced with sturdy boots, and her hair was now bound in a tight braid beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Calder was already there, checking the hooves of a bay mare by lantern light. He glanced up at her approach, gave a short nod of approval. "Better. You'll draw less attention now." He gestured to the mare. "This is Buttercup. Gentle temperament. Sure-footed. She'll carry you well." Caroline ran her hand along the horse's neck. "She's beautiful." "She's practical," Calder corrected, though not harshly. "Out here, beautiful gets you killed. Practical keeps you alive." He moved to his own horse, a massive black gelding with a white blaze down its face. The animal looked like it could run through hell and come out the other side still breathing. "Mount up," he said, swinging into his saddle with practiced ease. "We've got ground to cover." Caroline managed to get herself onto Buttercup with some dignity intact, grateful for the childhood riding lessons that now seemed like a lifetime ago. Calder watched her settle, then touched his heels to his horse's flanks. They rode out of town in silence, keeping to the shadows. The last buildings fell away behind them, and suddenly there was nothing but desert and stars. The moon hung low and full, painting the landscape in shades of silver and shadow. After an hour of steady riding, Calder finally spoke. "You know how to use a gun?" "No." He reined in his horse, reached into his saddlebag, and pulled out a Colt revolver. "Time to learn." "I don't think—" "Out here, thinking gets you killed too." He dismounted, helped her down. "Come on." He showed her how to hold it, how to sight, how to squeeze the trigger smooth instead of jerking it. The gun was heavier than she'd expected, cold in her hands despite the warm night. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said. "Neither do I, but wanting and needing are different things." He positioned himself behind her, his hands steadying hers on the gun. She could feel the solid warmth of him, smell leather and horse and something clean like sage. "See that cactus, the tall one shaped like a man, aim for the center." She fired. The recoil knocked her back against him, and her shot went wide. Again. 3 more shots, each one closer to the target. On the 5th, she clipped the edge of the cactus. Good enough for now. He took the gun back, but handed her a smaller one. "This is a Derringer, 2 shots only, but it'll fit in your boot. Last resort weapon." They mounted up again and continued into the night. Caroline found herself stealing glances at him as they rode. In the saloon, she'd been too frightened to really see him. Now, in the moonlight, she could make out the strong line of his profile, the way he sat his horse like he was born to it, the constant alertness in the way he scanned the horizon. "Why did you agree to help me?" she asked finally. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, had a sister once, about your age when she died. She got tangled up with the wrong man, made some poor choices trying to get free of him. No one would help her because she wasn't considered respectable anymore." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "I was away, working cattle drives. By the time I got back, she was gone." "I'm sorry." "Was a long time ago, but I remember thinking if just one person had helped her, asked fewer questions." He shrugged. "Can't change the past, but I can choose different now." They rode on, the desert gradually giving way to rougher terrain. Rocks rose around them like ancient sentinels, and Calder led them into a narrow canyon. "Apache watched the main trails," he explained. "We go the hard way." The hard way meant picking their path through boulder fields and dried stream beds, ducking low-hanging rock shelves, trusting the horse's night vision more than their own. Caroline's back began to ache, her hands to blister inside her gloves, but she didn't complain. Near dawn, Calder finally called a halt in a small box canyon with high walls and only one way in or out. A trickle of water ran down one wall, pooling in a natural basin. "We rest here until dusk," he said, dismounting. "Traveling by night is safer." He tended the horses first, rubbing them down, checking their hooves, making sure they drank. Caroline watched, impressed by his careful attention to the animals. "You've done this before," she observed. "Helped people cross. Some." He pulled jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, handed her a portion. "Eat, not fancy, but it'll keep you going." They sat against the canyon wall, sharing the meager meal and passing a canteen between them. The sun was rising, painting the rocks in shades of gold and red. "Tell me about the teaching," Calder said unexpectedly. "Must have been different from this." Caroline smiled sadly. "Very different. I had 12 students, ages 6 to 16, taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, some history." She picked at a piece of hardtack. "The Aldrich family funded the school. That's how I met Thomas. He'd come by sometimes, checking on his investment." "And he took a shine to you." "I was foolish. I thought he was being kind, supportive of education." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out he had other interests. When I refused his advances, he threatened to close the school, said no one would hire a teacher of loose morals. So you went to reason with him." "Stupid, I know. I thought if I could just make him understand." She shook her head. "He'd been drinking. He grabbed me. Wouldn't let go. I pushed him, just trying to get away. He fell, hit his head on the fireplace. There was so much blood." Calder was quiet for a moment. "Self-defense. Any fair court would see that. His brother is the circuit judge. His cousin is the sheriff. Fair doesn't enter into it." She met his eyes. "So you see, Mr. Boone, you're helping a killer after all." "Calder," he corrected. "And I'm helping a woman who defended herself. There's a difference." Something in the simple acceptance of his words made her throat tight. She'd been carrying the weight of guilt and fear for 3 days, and here was this stranger offering understanding without judgment. "You should sleep," he said, pulling a bedroll from his pack. "I'll keep watch." "What about you?" "I'll sleep when you wake. Someone needs to watch the entrance." She lay down on the bedroll, acutely aware of him sitting nearby, rifle across his knees. The canyon walls rose protectively around them, and despite everything, she felt safer than she had in days. "Calder," she said softly. Thank you for believing me. Get some rest. Caroline, we've got hard riding ahead." She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her under. The last thing she saw was him silhouetted against the morning light, standing guard like some ancient warrior. She'd known him less than 12 hours, but somehow she trusted him more than men she'd known for years. As sleep took her, she wondered what kind of man chose to live this life helping strangers, riding the dangerous trails, asking for nothing but a promise in return. What had carved those lines around his eyes, put that scar on his jaw, taught him to handle a gun like it was part of his arm? She'd offered him her body in desperation, thinking it was all she had left to bargain with. But he'd asked for something else entirely, her word, her trust, some unnamed future favor. It should have frightened her more, that open-ended debt. Instead, it felt like possibility. The sun climbed higher, baking the canyon walls. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried, and Calder Boone kept watch, patient as the stones themselves, while Caroline May Harper slept and dreamed of a world where men could be trusted, and promises didn't always come with a price. The desert turned cold when the sun went down, a fact that still surprised Caroline despite 3 nights of running. She pulled the borrowed coat tighter around her shoulders as they rode, grateful that Mrs. Garrett had insisted she take it. Behind her, she could feel the solid presence of Calder, his arm loosely circled around her waist as they shared his horse. Buttercup had thrown a shoe just after sunset, and they'd been forced to leave her hidden in a grove of mesquite trees. "Stop tensing up," Calder said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "Storm here needs to feel you move with him, not fight against him." She tried to relax, to let her body sway with the horse's gait. It was harder than it should have been. This closeness to a man she barely knew. Every slight bump in the trail pressed her back against his chest, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. "There," he said when she finally found the rhythm. "Better." They'd been riding for 3 hours since leaving the canyon, winding through trails that seemed invisible until Calder found them. The moon was new tonight, leaving only starlight to guide them, but he never hesitated. "How do you know where we're going?" she asked. "Landmarks. That ridge there looks like a wolf's head in daylight. The 3 rocks to our left line up with the North Star. You learn to read the land like a book." A wolf howled somewhere in the darkness, long and mournful. Caroline instinctively pressed back against him. "They won't bother us," he said. "We're too big to be prey, and they've got easier hunting this time of year." Another howl answered the first, then another, until it seemed the whole desert was singing, despite her fear. Caroline found it hauntingly beautiful. "My grandmother used to tell stories about wolves," she said softly. "Said they were the spirits of warriors who died far from home, calling out to find their way back." "Your grandmother Indian?" "Half Comanche on her mother's side. It wasn't something we talked about much in polite company." "Out here, polite company's thin on the ground anyway." There was a hint of dry humor in his voice. "My mother was Mexican. Caused quite a stir when my father brought her home to Missouri." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wolf songs fading behind them. Then Calder pulled up short, his body going rigid. "What?" "Shh." His hand moved to his gun. "Smoke. Someone's got a fire going, maybe half a mile upwind." Caroline's heart started racing. "Bounty hunters." Could be travelers. Cowboys. Apache. He considered for a moment. "We go around. Adds time. But better than riding into trouble." He turned storm east, picking their way carefully through a field of volcanic rock. The detour took them into a maze of stone pillars, twisted into strange shapes by ancient winds. In the starlight, they looked like frozen dancers or reaching hands. "This place gives me the shivers," Caroline whispered. "Ghost rocks, locals call it. Apaches say the spirits of ancient ones live here." He guided the horse between 2 towering formations. "Good place to lose pursuers, though sound echoes strange, makes it hard to track." As if to prove his point, a pebble knocked loose by Storm's hoof clattered away, the sound bouncing back and forth until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. They emerged from the rocks near midnight, and Calder headed for a dark line of trees in the distance. "Cienega Creek," he explained. "One of the few water sources that runs year-round. We'll rest there." The trees turned out to be cottonwoods, their leaves whispering secrets to the night wind. Calder found a sheltered spot where the creek had carved out a small beach of sand, hidden from view by overhanging willows. He helped her down, his hands firm but impersonal on her waist. Caroline missed the warmth of him immediately, though she'd never admit it. "I'll tend to Storm," he said. "You should wash up if you want. Water's cold but clean." Caroline made her way to the creek's edge, kneeling to cup the water in her hands. It was indeed cold, shocking against her dusty skin. She splashed her face, her neck, then glanced back to where Calder was unsaddling his horse, his back politely turned. She quickly unbuttoned her shirt enough to wash more thoroughly, the cold water a blessed relief against skin grimy with trail dust. When she finished, she found Calder had laid out a small camp, no fire, but bedrolls arranged and food unpacked. "No fire tonight," he confirmed, handing her jerky and dried fruit. "Too many eyes in the darkness." They ate quietly, sitting close enough to share warmth, but not touching. The creek babbled peacefully beside them, and somewhere an owl hooted. "Tell me about Missouri," Caroline said, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own fears. Not much to tell. Farm country. My father raised horses, tried to teach me the business. He took a swig from his canteen. I was better at breaking them than breeding them. Left when I was 17, joined up with a cattle drive heading to Kansas. Never went back. Your parents? Dead now. Fever took them both. Winter of 76. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she heard the old grief beneath it. The sister I mentioned, Mary. She was all I had left. Should have been there for her. You couldn't have known. Maybe not, but a man carries his failures whether he could have prevented them or not. Caroline understood that weight. She carried her own students she'd never teach again. A life she'd built so carefully now shattered. The image of Thomas Aldrich's blood that wouldn't leave her mind. Do you think they're following us? She asked. Count on it. You embarrassed powerful men by running. They'll want to make an example. He must have sensed her fear because he added, but we've got a good lead, and I know trails they don't. We'll make it. A branch snapped somewhere in the darkness. Calder was on his feet instantly, gun drawn, pushing Caroline behind him. They waited, tense, until a deer wandered into view, pausing to drink at the creek before bounding away. He holstered his gun but remained standing. Get some sleep. I'll keep watch. You watched all day. You must be exhausted. I've gone longer without sleep. You need rest more than I do. She lay down on the bedroll, but sleep felt impossible. Every sound made her jump the creek, the wind, the skitter of small animals in the brush. And she was cold, the desert night leaching warmth from the ground beneath her. She must have shivered because Calder moved closer, settling with his back against a cottonwood trunk near her bedroll. Cold. I'm fine. Stubborn won't keep you warm. He shrugged out of his duster, draped it over her. It smelled of leather and trail dust and that clean sage scent she was beginning to associate with safety. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness. In the starlight, she could see his profile, sharp nose, strong jaw, the pale line of that scar. He looked like he belonged here, part of the landscape itself. Calder, what will you do after when we reach the border? Turn around, ride back. Just like that. Just like that. Maybe pick up work at one of the ranches, or guide another traveler. There's always someone needs help getting somewhere. It sounds lonely. He was quiet for a long moment. Lonely's not the worst thing a man can be. Caroline thought about that, about the choices that led a person to embrace solitude over companionship. She'd been lonely too, even surrounded by people in Silver Creek. Lonely in a different way, the isolation of keeping up appearances, of smiling when you wanted to scream, of being seen as a role rather than a person. I won't forget this, she said softly. What you're doing for me. That's why I took your promise. So you won't forget. She wanted to ask what he might ask of her, this unnamed future debt. But exhaustion was finally winning, pulling her down into sleep despite her fears. The last thing she heard was Calder's voice, soft as the wind. Sleep easy, Caroline. Nothing's getting past me tonight. And somehow, despite everything, despite being hunted, despite the dangers ahead, despite trusting her life to a man she'd known less than a day, she believed him. The ghost of his warmth lingered in his coat, and the steady presence of him watching over her was more comforting than any locked door had ever been. In her dreams, wolves called to each other across the desert, and she was running not from something but toward it, following a man with ice-blue eyes through a landscape painted in starlight and possibility. The morning sun had just cleared the eastern ridge when Caroline spotted the dust cloud. She had been walking alongside Storm to stretch her legs, while Calder scouted ahead on foot, checking the trail through a narrow pass. Now she froze, watching the telltale sign of riders moving fast across the desert floor below them. Calder materialized beside her like a ghost, his approach so quiet she hadn't heard him coming. He followed her gaze, his expression hardening. 2 riders, he said quietly, moving with purpose. They're tracking something. Us. Most likely. He studied the distant dust for another moment. Mount up. We need to move. They pushed Storm harder than before, taking risks with the rocky terrain that made Caroline's heart lodge in her throat. Calder guided the horse along ledges barely wide enough for Storm's sure feet, through slots in the rock so narrow their legs brushed the walls on either side. By midday, they'd gained elevation, climbing into the foothills of the Chiricahua Mountains. The desert gave way to scattered junipers and pinyon pines, and the air held a hint of coolness that promised water somewhere ahead. There's a place, Calder said, his voice tight with a strain of constant vigilance. Old Apache camp. Good defensive position if we need it. They found it an hour later, a natural fortress of weathered granite boulders forming a rough circle, with a spring-fed pool at its center. Ancient fire rings showed where others had sheltered here over the years. Calder helped her down, then immediately set about checking their surroundings. Stay with the horse, he ordered, disappearing among the rocks. Caroline watered Storm, her hands shaking slightly as she ran them over his sweat-darkened coat. The big horse nuzzled her shoulder, as if sensing her fear. 2 riders, she whispered to him. Just 2. Calder's faced worse. Hasn't he? The horse snorted softly, which she chose to take as agreement. Calder returned, his jaw set. They're maybe 2 hours behind. Know what they're doing. 2 found our trail even after I tried to hide it. What do? We make a choice. Try to outrun them. Risk exhausting Storm and getting caught in the open. Or we wait here. Let them come. Deal with it on ground of our choosing. Caroline's mouth went dry. Deal with it. He met her eyes steadily. I told you I'd get you across alive. I meant it. But that might mean doing things that aren't pretty. She thought of the noose waiting for her back in Silver Creek, of Thomas Aldrich's brother promising she'd hang before she could speak a word in her own defense. I understand. Do you? His voice was harsh. Because once shooting starts, there's no taking it back. Those men down there might have families, might be decent folks just trying to collect a bounty to feed their children. You ready to carry that? Caroline lifted her chin. They made their choice when they decided my life was worth money. I won't apologize for wanting to live. Something shifted in Calder's expression approval. Maybe, or respect. All right then, help me set up. They worked together. Calder positioning their supplies and checking sight lines, while Caroline gathered ammunition and filled every canteen from the spring. He showed her where to take cover, a natural pocket in the rocks that would shield her from most angles. If shooting starts, you stay down, he instructed. No heroics. That derringer I gave you is last resort only if someone gets past me and comes for you directly. Where will you be? He pointed to a ledge that commanded a view of the main approach. There, don't worry about me. I've done this before. They settled in to wait. Calder took position on his ledge, rifle ready, while Caroline huddled in her rocky shelter. The sun tracked across the sky, and still the riders didn't appear. The waiting was almost worse than running. Every bird call made her jump. Every shift of wind sounded like approaching horses. Then, just as the sun touched the western peaks, they came. Caroline saw them first, 2 men picking their way up the trail, following Storm's tracks. One was older, grizzled, riding a paint horse. The other was younger, lean and hungry-looking on a bay. Both had rifles across their saddles. That's far enough, Calder called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Both men pulled up sharply, hands moving toward their weapons. I wouldn't. Calder continued. Got a clear shot on both of you. Just turn around, head back where you came from. The older man spat tobacco juice. Can't do that, friend. Got paper on the woman you're traveling with. Legal bounty. All proper-like. Nothing proper about hanging a woman for self-defense. That ain't for us to decide. the younger one called out. Law says she goes back to stand trial. Whose law? Calder's voice was cold. Thomas Aldrich's brother, the judge who already announced she'll hang. The two bounty hunters exchanged glances. Then the older one shrugged. Don't matter to us, Mr. Bounty's $500 alive. 300 dead. Either way, we're taking her back. Caroline's blood chilled at the casual mention of her death. Her hand found the derringer in her boot. Here's what's going to happen, Calder said. You're going to turn those horses around and ride out. Tell whoever's paying that she got across the border, that you lost the trail. Take whatever money they'll give you for trying, but you're done chasing her. Can't do it, the younger one said, and Caroline saw his hand inch toward his rifle. Stop! Calder's voice cracked like a whip. Hand moves another inch and you'll be explaining to St. Peter why you died for money. The tension stretched tight as wire. Caroline could barely breathe, watching the two men calculate their chances. Then the older bounty hunter smiled, ugly and knowing. You're Calder Boone. Ain't you heard about you, the man who helps folks disappear? Got quite a reputation. Then you know I keep my word. Also heard you don't kill unless you have to. Not like the old days when you rode with Dutch McCready's gang. Caroline's mind reeled. Calder had ridden with outlaws. Dutch McCready was a name even she knew, a killer whose gang had terrorized 3 territories before the cavalry finally tracked them down. That was a long time ago, Calder said evenly. I'm a different man now. Maybe, but different enough to shoot 2 men just doing their job. The bounty hunter's smile widened. I don't think so. I think we can take you, especially with you worried about keeping the pretty teacher safe. It happened fast. The younger bounty hunter went for his rifle, and Calder's shot cracked across the canyon. The rifle flew from the man's hands, and he cried out, clutching his shoulder. The next one's in your chest, Calder warned. Both of you, weapons on the ground, now. The older man raised his hand slowly. Easy there. Boy got excited is all. He carefully removed his gun belt. Let it drop. We'll go, but this ain't over. That bounty's too good to pass up. If not us, others will come. Let them. She'll be across the border by then. The 2 men gathered their weapons under Calder's watchful eye, the younger one cradling his bleeding shoulder. They mounted awkwardly, and Caroline thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. The older bounty hunter turned in his saddle, and something in his movement must have warned Calder. The hidden gun appeared in the man's hand like magic, already swinging toward Calder's position. 2 shots split the air almost simultaneously. The bounty hunter's bullet sparked off the rock inches from Calder's head. Calder's shot took the man's center mass, knocking him backward off his horse. The younger man screamed, reaching for his fallen companion with his good arm. Jake, Jake! But Jake wasn't moving, would never move again. Get him and go, Calder commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. Tell them what happened here. Tell them the next ones won't get a warning shot. The younger bounty hunter struggled to lift his partner's body across the paint horse, sobbing and cursing. When he finally managed it, he looked up at where Calder sat, invisible among the rocks. You'll pay for this, he snarled. Jake had a wife, 2 boys. You murdered him. He drew on me after I let him go. Remember that when you tell the story. Calder's voice was hard as the granite around them. Now ride. Don't make me orphan any more children today. They watched the sad procession disappear down the trail, 1 man leading 2 horses, 1 carrying the dead. Caroline emerged from her shelter on shaking legs, making her way to where Calder had climbed down from his perch. He stood with his back to her, staring at the blood soaking into the sandy ground. His hands were steady, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the weight he carried. You tried to let them go, she said softly. Trying doesn't bring back the dead. He finally turned to face her. You still want to ride with a killer man who used to run with Dutch McCready? You're not that man anymore. How do you know? Caroline stepped closer, close enough to see the pain he kept buried deep. Because that man wouldn't have tried to spare them, wouldn't have warned them, given them chances to leave. She touched his arm gently. You're not him anymore. Calder, you're the man who's saving my life. He looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in those ice-blue eyes. Then the walls came back up, and he was all business again. We need to move. That boy will bring others, and now they know where we are. He paused, meeting her eyes. It'll be hard riding from here. No more stops, no more rest until we cross. You up for it? Caroline thought of Jake's blood in the sand, of widows and orphans, of the price of her freedom. But she also thought of the noose, of Thomas Aldrich's hands on her, of a system that called her guilty before she could speak. I'm ready, she said, and meant it. They packed quickly, refilled their water, and set out as darkness fell. Behind them, the ancient camp held its secrets, blood and gun smoke added to centuries of similar stories. Ahead lay the border, and beyond that, the unknown. Caroline rode behind Calder on Storm, her arms around his waist, feeling the solid reality of him killer and savior, outlaw and protector, the man who'd given death and life in the same afternoon. She'd thought she understood him, but now she realized she'd barely scratched the surface. Calder, she said as they picked their way down a treacherous slope. Yeah. Thank you for trying to spare them, for caring enough to try. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, don't thank me yet, Caroline. We're not across, and now they know we'll fight. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But she kept her arms around him, drawing strength from his presence, and thought that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth the cost, even if that cost was measured in blood. The storm hit them just after midnight, rolling in from the west with a fury that turned the desert into chaos. Lightning split the sky in jagged white veins, and thunder shook the ground beneath Storm's hooves. Within minutes, the scattered drops became a deluge that soaked through their clothes and turned the trail into a river of mud. There! Calder shouted over the roar of wind and water, pointing toward a dark shape ahead. Old Way Station. They fought their way through the tempest, Storm struggling to keep his footing on the treacherous ground. Caroline pressed her face against Calder's back, trying to shield herself from the driving rain that felt like needles against her skin. The way station materialized out of the darkness, a low adobe structure with half its roof caved in, abandoned years ago when the stage routes changed, but the remaining portion looked solid enough, and right now it seemed like paradise. Calder led Storm into what had once been a stable, the three of them crowding into the only corner where the roof still held. He worked quickly to unsaddle the horse while Caroline stood shivering, her teeth chattering so hard she couldn't speak. Inside, he commanded, grabbing their saddlebags. Now! The main building was in better shape than the stable, though wind whistled through gaps in the walls and rain dripped through holes in the ceiling. An old iron stove sat in one corner, and miracle of miracles, there was dry wood stacked beside it, probably left by other travelers seeking shelter. Calder had a fire going within minutes, his hands steady despite the cold. Get those wet clothes off, he said without looking at her. There's a blanket in my pack. You'll catch your death otherwise. Caroline hesitated, modesty warring with the very real danger of freezing. Another violent shiver decided her. She moved to the far corner, turning her back to him as she peeled off the sodden fabric that clung to her skin like ice. The blanket was rough wool, but it was dry and warm. She wrapped it around herself tightly, then spread her clothes near the fire to dry. When she turned back, she found Calder had done the same, wearing only his pants while his shirt and coat steamed beside hers. In the firelight, she could see the map of scars across his chest and back, some old and faded, others newer. A bullet wound near his shoulder, what looked like knife marks along his ribs. The history of violence written on his skin made her breath catch. He noticed her staring and turned away. Sorry, should have warned you. No, She moved closer to the fire. To him. Does it hurt your shoulder? He glanced at the wound. Seemed surprised she'd asked. Sometimes, when weather changes, mostly. How did it happen? Bank robbery in Tucson, not mine, he added quickly. I was trying to stop it. Town marshal deputized anyone willing to help. Took a bullet for my trouble. And the others? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Life hasn't always been kind. Made some poor choices when I was younger. Rode with the wrong people. These are reminders of what that costs. Caroline pulled the blanket tighter around herself, studying his profile in the dancing light. Dutch McCready's gang. You heard what that bounty hunter said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you're not running for the door. In this storm, besides, she said softly. I'd rather take my chances with you than with what's waiting for me out there. He looked at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. I was 22 when I joined up with Dutch, angry at the world. Thought I was too smart to punch cattle for $30 a month. Dutch promised easy money. Excitement. His laugh was bitter. Got the excitement. All right. Also got to watch good people die. Saw what greed does to men's souls. What made you leave? Little town called Perdition. Dutch wanted to rob the bank, but it was harvest time. All the farmers' money was in there, their whole year's work. I tried to talk him out of it. He touched a scar on his ribs. He disagreed, forcefully. He tried to kill you. His lieutenant did, man named Garrett Ward. Would have succeeded too if Mary hadn't warned me. She was... He paused, pain flickering across his features. She was involved with Ward. Thought she could change him. Caroline remembered what he'd said about his sister, how she died because no one would help her. She saved your life. That night, yes, I got away, but I was hurt bad. An old Mexican woman found me, nursed me back to health. By the time I could ride again, the cavalry had caught up with Dutch. Most of the gang died in the shootout. But not Ward. No, he got away. Came back for Mary later, after I'd left to find work. His hands clenched into fists. She sent me one letter. Said she was happy, that Ward had changed. Next thing I knew, she was dead. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside their small shelter, there was only the crackle of burning wood and the weight of shared confessions. I'm sorry, Caroline said. For Mary, for all of it. Long time ago. But she could hear that it wasn't. Not really. Some wounds never fully healed. She shivered again, despite the fire and the blanket. Without thinking, she moved closer to him, drawn by warmth and something else, a need to offer comfort. Maybe, or to seek it. You're still cold, he observed. The blanket's not quite enough. He hesitated, then opened his arm. Come here. Body heat's the best remedy. She moved into the shelter of his arm, careful to keep the blanket between them, preserving what modesty she could. His skin was warm, almost hot compared to her chill, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart. This is improper, she said, even as she settled against him. So is freezing to death. His voice held a hint of dry humor. I think the Lord will forgive us this once. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm. Caroline found herself studying the interplay of light and shadow on his scarred skin, the way his breathing gradually synced with hers. You're not what I expected, she said quietly. When you walked into that saloon looking for help? Yes, I don't know what I thought. Someone harder, maybe meaner. I can be both those things when necessary. But that's not who you are. Not really. She tilted her head to look up at him. You're a good man. Calder Boone, despite everything. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know enough. I know you gave those bounty hunters every chance to leave peacefully. I know you've spent years helping people like me, asking nothing in return but a promise. I know you carry your sister's death like a weight, trying to make up for not being there. His arm tightened around her slightly. Careful, Caroline. Don't go making me into something I'm not. I've done plenty of dark deeds. Killed men, stolen, hurt people who didn't deserve it. But you stopped. You changed. Did I killed a man yesterday. To save us. To save me. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the raised ridge of an old scar. That's not the same thing. He covered her hand with his touch gentle despite the calluses. You always see the best in people. No, I trusted Thomas Aldrich. Remember, I see who you're trying to be, and I think that matters more than who you were. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Caroline? A loud crack of thunder interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. The fire flickered as wind found a gap in the walls, and they both shivered. We should sleep, he said, his voice rougher than before. Storm will blow itself out by morning, and we'll need to ride hard to make up lost time. She nodded, but didn't move away. Neither did he. The impropriety of their situation, nearly unclothed, pressed close together, should have horrified her proper sensibilities. Instead, she felt safe, protected, and something else. Something warm, unfurling in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Calder, what will you ask of me when you collect on my promise? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I don't know yet. Maybe I never will. Maybe the debt's already paid, just by letting me help you. That doesn't seem fair to you. Fair's got nothing to do with it. He shifted, pulling a bedroll closer with his free hand. Here, lie down before you fall over. Keep the blanket. I'll be fine. She stretched out on the bedroll, but when he started to move away, she caught his hand. Stay, please, just stay close. I don't want to be alone tonight. He looked at her for a long moment, then lay down beside her, careful to keep space between them. But she could feel his warmth, his presence, and it was enough. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being who you are, scars and all. She felt rather than heard his soft laugh. Go to sleep, Caroline. We've got miles to go yet. She closed her eyes, listening to the storm gradually weakening outside. In the morning, they would ride again, still pursued, still in danger. But for now, in this broken shelter with this complicated man beside her, she felt something she hadn't experienced since that night in Thomas Aldrich's study piece. The fire burned lower, casting dancing shadows on the adobe walls, and Caroline May Harper, proper schoolteacher turned fugitive, slept soundly beside a former outlaw who'd killed for her freedom and asked nothing in return but a promise she was beginning to think she'd give freely, whenever he chose to claim it. The morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Caroline woke to find herself alone, the blanket tucked carefully around her and her clothes dry by the now cold fire. Through the broken doorway, she could see Calder tending to Storm, his movements efficient despite what must have been an uncomfortable night. She dressed quickly, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles from days of hard riding. When she emerged from the station, Calder looked up, his expression unreadable in the morning light. Border's less than a day's ride, he said without preamble. But we've got a problem. Her heart sank. What kind of problem? He pointed to the horizon where dust clouds were rising, not just one, but 3 separate plumes. They're boxing us in. Someone's coordinating this hunt. Judge Aldrich, Caroline said bitterly. He must have sent word ahead, hired men on this side too. Smart play. Calder studied the terrain with a tactical eye. Main trail's blocked for sure. We'll have to take Skeleton Canyon. Skeleton Canyon. Apache name for it. Sacred ground. Most white men won't follow us there. Too many stories about curses and warriors who never left. He glanced at her. You afraid of ghosts? Caroline. Less afraid of them than of ropes around my neck. Good answer. He moved to saddle Storm. We'll push hard for the canyon. Once we're in, we can use the rocks and narrows to our advantage. But Caroline, He paused, his back to her. "If they catch us in the open first, I want you to run. Take Storm and ride for the border. Don't look back." "I won't leave you." He turned then, his eyes hard. "You will if I tell you to. That's an order." "I don't take orders from you. Calder Boone." "You do if you want to live." His voice softened slightly. "Please, let me do what I promised, get you across alive." She wanted to argue, but the dust clouds were getting closer. They mounted Storm together, and Calder urged the horse into a ground-eating gallop that had them flying across the desert floor. They'd covered maybe 5 miles when the first riders appeared, 4 men cresting a ridge to their south, spurring their horses down the slope at a dangerous pace. "Hold on," Calder warned, veering Storm toward a dry wash that offered some cover. Gunshots cracked behind them, bullets whining past like angry hornets. Caroline pressed herself against Calder's back, making herself as small a target as possible. They plunged into the wash, Storm's hooves sending up sprays of gravel. The walls rose around them, providing temporary shelter, but Caroline could hear the thunder of pursuit getting closer. "There," Calder pointed to where the wash split. "Left fork leads to the canyon." They took the turn at full speed, Storm's muscles bunching and stretching beneath them. More shots rang out, and Caroline felt Calder jerk against her. "You're hit." "I'm fine. Just a graze." But she could see blood soaking through his shirt near his shoulder, the same shoulder that had the old bullet wound. The wash opened up ahead, and she could see the mouth of Skeleton Canyon, towering red rocks that did indeed look like ancient bones reaching toward the sky. But between them and safety stood 2 more riders, rifles already raised. Calder drew his Colt, firing one-handed while controlling Storm with the other. One rider's horse reared. Throwing him, the other dove for cover behind a boulder. "When I slow down, you slide off and run for those rocks." Calder commanded. "No, Caroline." But there was no time. The riders from behind burst out of the wash, and suddenly they were caught in a crossfire. Calder twisted in the saddle, shooting back while trying to shield Caroline with his body. Storm screamed a sound Caroline would never forget as a bullet found his flank. The great horse stumbled, and Calder barely managed to pull Caroline clear as Storm went down. They hit the ground hard, rolling behind a cluster of rocks as bullets sparked off the stone around them. Calder shoved her deeper into cover, then turned to face their attackers. 6 men, he counted, checking his ammunition. "I've got maybe 8 shots left." Caroline pulled out the derringer he'd given her. 2 shots against 6 men. "Stay down," he ordered, then rose slightly to fire at a man trying to flank them. What followed was the longest 10 minutes of Caroline's life. Calder fought like a man possessed, using every trick learned in a lifetime of violence. He made each shot count, using ricochet and angles, forcing their attackers to stay cautious. But they were outnumbered, and he was bleeding from multiple wounds, now the shoulder, a crease along his ribs, another on his thigh. His face was pale beneath the sun-weathered tan, but his hands remained steady. "Calder Boone," one of the attackers called out. "Let us have the woman. No need for you to die over some schoolteacher's bounty." "Can't do it," Calder called back, reloading with bloodied fingers. "She's worth $500 to us. What's she worth to you?" Calder glanced at Caroline, something fierce and protective in his eyes. "Everything," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Then louder, "Come and take her." More gunfire erupted. Caroline saw Calder grimace as another bullet found its mark, this time in his side. He dropped to one knee, still shooting, still fighting. That's when she saw the man creeping up on their blind side, using Storm's body as cover. He was almost on them, rifle aimed at Calder's back. Caroline didn't think. She raised the derringer and fired. The man stumbled, clutching his arm, his rifle spinning away. Calder spun at the sound, finished what Caroline had started with a shot that dropped the man permanently. "Good girl," he gasped, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. "One shot left. Make it count." The remaining attackers had grown cautious, content to keep them pinned down. Caroline could hear them calling to each other, planning their final rush. "Caroline!" Calder's voice was weaker now. "When they come, you run for the canyon. Promise me." "Stop asking me to leave you." "Stubborn woman." Despite everything, there was fondness in his voice. "Should have known when you walked into that saloon."
"Yes,"
she said fiercely.
"you should have."
She tore strips from her petticoat, trying to staunch the worst of his wounds. His blood was shockingly red against her hands, and she fought down panic. "Hey," he caught her hand. "Look at me." She met his eyes, surprised to see them calm despite the pain he must be feeling. "Whatever happens, this wasn't your fault. You didn't ask for any of this." "Neither did you." "I chose it, every step." He squeezed her hand. "No regrets." The attackers were moving again. Caroline could see them spreading out for their final assault. 5 men against 1 wounded protector and a woman with a single shot. That's when they heard a sound that made everyone freeze. Horse hooves, many of them, and voices calling out in Apache. The attackers scrambled for their horses, suddenly more concerned with escape than bounty. The Apache warriors crested the ridge like ghosts of the desert itself. Paint on their faces, rifles in their hands. "Don't move," Calder whispered urgently. "Don't speak. Let me handle this." The lead Apache rider was an older man, his face weathered like ancient leather. He surveyed the seen dead men, a dying horse, Calder bleeding from multiple wounds, Caroline trying to hold him upright. The Apache leader said something in his own language. Calder responded, his voice respectful despite his pain. They went back and forth several times, and Caroline caught a word that sounded like a name, Nantan. Finally, the Apache leader nodded. He barked orders to his men, who dismounted and began checking the bodies of their attackers. "Old debt," Calder explained quietly to Caroline. "Saved Nantan's son from a cavalry patrol years back. He said the spirits of the canyon told him we needed help." 2 of the Apache warriors approached, lifting Calder carefully despite his attempts to protest. They carried him toward the canyon, motioning for Caroline to follow. "Where are they taking us?" "Somewhere safe," Calder managed. "To heal. Border will have to wait." As they entered Skeleton Canyon, Caroline looked back once at the battlefield they'd left behind. Storm lay still in the dust, having given everything to get them this far. The men who'd hunted them were scattered, fled or fallen. She walked beside the Apache carrying Calder, one hand on his arm so he'd know she was there. His blood dripped onto the ancient stones, but he was still breathing, still fighting. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Not going anywhere," he replied, though his voice was fading. "Still gotta get you across. Gave my word." The canyon walls rose around them, red as blood in the afternoon sun. Somewhere ahead, safety waited. But first, Calder had to survive his wounds, and Caroline had to trust these unexpected saviors. As they went deeper into the sacred canyon, following paths worn by centuries of feet, Caroline realized the border wasn't their destination anymore. It was just a line on a map. What mattered was the man bleeding in the arms of former enemies, the man who'd literally given his blood to keep his promise to her. She'd offered him her first night in desperation. Now, watching him fight for each breath, she knew she'd give him all her nights if he just lived to see another dawn. The Apache camp was hidden deep within Skeleton Canyon, in a place where water seeped from the rocks and ancient petroglyphs marked the walls. Caroline had lost track of time. It could have been hours or days since they'd arrived. All that mattered was the man lying on a bed of woven blankets, fighting fever dreams while she kept vigil. The medicine woman, whom the others called Dahlia, worked with quiet efficiency. She'd cleaned Calder's wounds with herbs that stung sharp in the air, packed them with poultices that smelled of sage and something earthy Caroline couldn't identify. But it was the fever that worried them most, the poison from his wounds spreading through his blood like wildfire. You his woman? Dahlia asked in broken English as she prepared another remedy. Caroline hesitated.
He's helping me. We're traveling together.
The old woman studied her with knowing eyes.
You sit like wife, worry like wife, touch like wife.
Caroline felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't realized how often she'd been stroking Calder's hand, smoothing his sweat-dampened hair, whispering encouragements when he thrashed in his delirium.
He's a good man,
she said simply. Dahlia handed her a bowl of water and clean cloths.
Cool him.
Fever must break tonight, or... She didn't finish, but Caroline understood. As darkness fell, Calder's condition worsened. He burned with heat. Muttering names Caroline didn't recognize Dutch. Mary, Ward. Sometimes he called for his mother in Spanish. Once, he grabbed her hand and said her name with such clarity she thought he'd woken. But his eyes remained closed, lost in whatever battle he was fighting inside.
Please,
Caroline whispered, bathing his face with cool water.
Please don't leave me. Not like this.
Nantan entered the shelter, his presence commanding despite his quiet movements. He spoke to Dahlia in Apache, then turned to Caroline. He walks the spirit path, Nantan said in careful English. Between this world and next, someone must call him back.
How? Speak true words. From here.
He touched his chest, over his heart.
Spirits listen to truth.
Nantan and Dahlia left them alone, and Caroline found herself in the flickering firelight with only Calder and the weight of unspoken truths.
I lied to you,
she began, her voice barely above a whisper. In the saloon. When I made that offer, I acted like I was sacrificing something, like it was the hardest thing I'd ever done.
But the truth is...
She took a shaky breath.
The truth is, when I looked at you, I felt safe for the first time since Thomas Aldrich put his hands on me. And when you refused my offer, asked for my promise instead,
I was disappointed. Calder stirred slightly but didn't wake. I told myself I was grateful, that you were a gentleman, but deep down, in places proper ladies don't acknowledge, I wanted you to say yes. Not because of the bargain, but because I wanted to know what it would be like, to be touched by someone I chose, someone I trusted. She dipped the cloth again, cooling his burning skin. These past days, riding with you, fighting beside you, I felt more alive than in all my years of being respectable. You see me, Calder, not the school teacher, not the desperate woman, not the fugitive, just me. His breathing seemed easier, but the fever still raged.
I've been thinking about that promise you hold,
she continued,
wondering what you'll ask of me. But the truth is, I'd give you anything now. Not because I owe you, but because...
The words caught in her throat.
Because somewhere between that saloon and this canyon, I fell in love with you.
She laughed softly, tears streaming down her face.
Isn't that ridiculous?
A proper school teacher falling for a former outlaw, my mother would be scandalized. But then, she never met a man who'd bleed himself dry keeping his word, who'd face down 6 men rather than break a promise. Caroline leaned closer, pressing her lips to his burning forehead. So, here's my new promise. Calder Boone, if you live, if you come back to me, I won't run when we reach the border. I won't disappear into Mexico and leave you behind. I'll stay. If you'll have me, we'll face whatever comes together. She sat back, watching his face in the firelight. For a moment, nothing changed. Then his eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with difficulty.
Caroline!
His voice was raw, barely there. I'm here. She gripped his hand tightly.
I'm right here.
Thought I heard... He swallowed painfully. Thought you said... Every word was true. He studied her face, as if memorizing it.
The promise. Want to change it.
To what?
Stay, he whispered. Just stay.
Always, she promised, and meant it.
His eyes closed again, but this time in natural sleep. She felt his forehead still warm, but the burning heat was fading. The fever had broken. Caroline stayed awake through the night, watching him breathe, holding his hand, occasionally speaking soft words of encouragement. When dawn painted the canyon walls pink and gold, Dahlia returned. The medicine woman checked Calder's wounds, felt his temperature, and nodded approval. He chose life, strong spirit. And you? She looked at Caroline with those knowing eyes. Use strong medicine for him. Over the next 3 days, Calder's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. He was weak, frustrated by his body's limitations, but the wounds were clean and healing. Caroline rarely left his side, helping him eat, changing his bandages under Dahlia's supervision, simply being present when the pain kept him from sleeping. On the 4th day, he was strong enough to sit up, propped against the canyon wall in the shade. Caroline sat beside him, their shoulders touching. I remember what you said, he told her quietly. When the fever was bad. Her heart skipped. Oh, did you mean it about staying? Every word. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I've got nothing to offer you. Caroline, no home, no steady work. Just a life of drifting, helping folks who need it, trying to make up for the past. That sounds like a good life to me. You could go to Mexico, start fresh, be a teacher again, find a proper husband who doesn't come with bullet scars and bad history. Caroline turned to face him fully. I don't want a proper husband. I want you, scars, history, and all. You sure about that once we cross together? Once people know you're with me? There's no going back to respectable. Respectable nearly got me hanged for defending myself. I think I'm done with respectable. He reached out, touched her face gently. You know what you're choosing. Yes, I'm choosing you. The question is, will you choose me back? Instead of answering with words, he drew her closer, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. It was nothing like Thomas Aldrich's grabbing demands. This was gentle, questioning, promising. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Is that a yes? She asked. That's a yes to everything, he confirmed. To staying, to facing whatever comes together, to... He paused, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. To loving you back, if you'll have me. I'll have you, she said firmly. In fact, I insist on it. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the life of the Apache camp flow around them. Children played in the dust. Women worked at daily tasks. Warriors prepared for a hunt. It was a world completely different from anything Caroline had known. Yet she felt more at home here with Calder than she'd ever felt in Silver Creek. We still need to cross the border, Calder reminded her. You're still wanted. I know, but not today. No, not today. Maybe not tomorrow either. He pulled her closer. Right now, I'm content to heal and hold you and figure out what this new life looks like. It looks like us, Caroline said simply. Everything else will work out as we go. Nantan approached them then, his weathered face showing approval. You stay until he's strong, he told Caroline. Then we help you reach border, old trails, safe trails. Thank you, Caroline said, for everything. The Apache leader looked between them, a slight smile creasing his face. No thanks needed. Canyon spirits say you belong together. Who argues with spirits? As he walked away, Calder chuckled softly. Canyon spirits, huh? Don't mock the canyon spirits, Caroline warned. They saved your life. No, he corrected, looking at her with those ice-blue eyes that had first caught her attention in that dusty saloon. You did that, with your stubborn refusal to leave and your true words in the dark. We saved each other, she decided, and we'll keep doing it. That's a promise. And there in the sacred canyon, surrounded by ancient stones and watchful spirits,
two broken people began the slow work of healing, not just from wounds of the flesh, but from all the invisible scars life had carved into their hearts. They had miles yet to travel and dangers still to face. But for now, they had each other. It was more than enough. It was everything. 2 weeks had passed in the shelter of Skeleton Canyon. Calder's wounds had closed, leaving fresh scars to join the old ones. And his strength had mostly returned. The Apache had provided them with horses not as fine as Storm, but sturdy and trail-wise. Now, as dawn broke over the desert, it was time to complete their journey. Nantan himself led them through secret paths known only to his people, trails that twisted through hidden valleys and along ancient riverbeds. By midday, they stood on a rise overlooking the border, marked only by a wooden post and a shallow ditch that might have been natural or man-made. There, Nantan pointed. Cross, and your law cannot touch you. Caroline stared at that simple boundary, amazed that something so insignificant could mean the difference between freedom and a noose. Beside her, Calder sat steady in his saddle, though she could see the journey had tired him more than he'd admit. We're grateful, Calder told the Apache leader, for everything. Nantan nodded. Debt is paid, but remember the desert does not care which side of line you stand. Be careful. They watched as Nantan and his warriors melted back into the landscape, becoming one with the rocks and shadows. Then it was just the two of them, sitting their horses at the edge of everything. Second thoughts, Calder asked quietly. No, Caroline said firmly. You? Never. He reached across the space between their horses, taking her hand. Ready? Together, they crossed the border. No fanfare, no drama, just two horses stepping across an invisible line that changed everything and nothing all at once. On the other side, they found a well-worn trail leading south. They followed it for several hours until they reached a small settlement hardly more than a trading post, a cantina, and a few adobe buildings scattered like dice across the dusty ground. The old man running the trading post barely looked up when they entered. Americans. Yes, Calder replied. Running from something or to something. Both, Caroline said, surprising herself with the honesty. The old man smiled, revealing missing teeth. Aren't we all? You'll be wanting supplies. Then, maybe directions to Sanctuary. Sanctuary, Calder asked. Town about day's ride south. Americans who can't go home. Mexicans who don't fit in elsewhere. Indians who walk between worlds. Good place for new starts. They bought supplies, dried beans, cornmeal, salt, ammunition. The old man threw in a worn map, marking Sanctuary with a stub of pencil. Tell them Miguel sent you. He said they'll treat you fair. They made camp that night by a small spring, the stars bright overhead. Caroline cooked a simple meal while Calder tended the horses, and they ate in comfortable silence. It was the first time in weeks they'd been truly alone, without danger pressing at their backs or others watching. So, Calder said eventually, we made it. We did. Caroline looked at him across the small fire. Now what? I was thinking about that. Sanctuary sounds like a place we could settle for a while. You could teach again. Maybe start a school. And you, he shrugged. Always work for a man who's good with horses and guns. Could hire on at a ranch. Maybe scout for wagon trains heading through. Caroline set down her plate, moved around the fire to sit beside him. Is that what you want to settle down? I want... He paused, choosing words carefully. I want to wake up in the same place for more than a few days running. Want to build something instead of always running or fighting. Want to see you smile without fear behind it. He looked at her. What do you want? The same, she admitted. A home. Work that matters. You beside me when I go to sleep and when I wake up. He pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Sounds like we want the same things. There's just one problem, Caroline said. What's that? We're not married. In a small town, even one like Sanctuary, people will talk. Calder was quiet for a moment. Is that something you'd want marriage? She sat up to look at him. Are you asking? He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking younger. Uncertain. I've got nothing to offer. No family name worth having. No property, no... Calder. She stopped him with a finger to his lips. I don't care about any of that. You deserve better than a man who risked everything to save me, who took bullets meant for me, who sees me as I really am, and wants me anyway. She cupped his face in her hands. There is no better. He caught her hands, holding them gently. Caroline May Harper, if you'd have me. Yes, she said before he could finish. Yes to whatever you're trying to ask. He kissed her then, deeper than before, with promise and passion and something that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. We'll need to find someone to marry us. Calder said, might be a priest in Sanctuary. Or maybe the town judge, if they have one. You sure you want to tie yourself to a former outlaw? I'm a wanted woman. Remember, we match. They talked long into the night, making plans that felt both fragile and solid. A small house with a garden. A school where Caroline could teach any child who wanted to learn. Maybe a stable where Calder could work with horses. Simple dreams, but precious for their simplicity. When they finally lay down to sleep, still separate, still maintaining the proprieties that seemed both important and silly. After all they'd been through, Caroline felt a contentment she'd never known before. Calder, she whispered in the darkness. What about the promise I made you never collected? She felt him smile. Already did. Asked you to stay. Remember? That seems too easy. After all you did. Caroline. His voice was serious now. You gave me something worth more than any promise. What's that? A reason to be better. To build something instead of drift. To believe the past doesn't have to define the future. He found her hand in the darkness. Squeezed gently. That's worth any price. The next morning, they rode into Sanctuary as the sun painted the mountains gold. The town was exactly as Miguel had described, a collection of mismatched buildings and mismatched people, all trying to build something new from the pieces of their old lives. They found the town office, where a Mexican official with kind eyes took their names for the census. You are married, he asked. Not yet, Calder said, but hoping to be soon. The man smiled. Father Francisco performs weddings. Also, Senora Martinez needs teacher for the children, and Don Roberto always needs good men for horses. Sounds like we came to the right place, Caroline said. They found a small boarding house willing to rent them rooms separate. The proprietress insisted with a stern look. Until they were properly married. It made Caroline smile. This return to propriety after all they'd survived. That evening, they walked through their new town, seeing the possibility in its dusty streets. Children played while their mothers called them home in 3 different languages. Men tipped their hats without asking questions about the past. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. No regrets, Calder asked as they stood watching the sunset paint the sky crimson. None, Caroline said firmly. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be. He took her hand, and they stood together at the edge of their new life. Behind them lay miles of desert, blood and gunfire, fear and flight. Ahead lay the unknown, but it was an unknown they'd face together. Home, Caroline said softly, testing the word. Home, Calder agreed. And in that moment, standing in a town full of strangers who understood the value of second chances, they both knew they'd found something worth more than gold or safety or even freedom. They'd found each other. The border was behind them now, just a line in the dirt that had once seemed insurmountable. They'd crossed it not just in body, but in spirit, leaving behind the people they'd been for the people they could become.
Tomorrow, they'd see Father Francisco about a wedding. Tomorrow, Caroline would meet the children who needed teaching, and Calder would talk to Don Roberto about horses. Tomorrow, they'd begin building the life they'd dreamed about by the campfire. But tonight, they simply stood together, hands linked, watching the stars emerge in the desert sky. They'd made it across alive, just as Calder had promised, but more than that, they'd made it across together, and that made all the difference. "Thank you," Caroline whispered. "For what?" "For keeping your promise, for bringing me home." "No," Calder corrected softly. "Thank you for giving me one." The small adobe church stood at the heart of sanctuary, its whitewashed walls glowing in the morning sun. Caroline smoothed the simple blue dress Senora Martinez had lent her, her hands trembling slightly. It had been 1 week since they'd arrived in town, 7 days of settling in, of Calder working with Don Roberto's horses while she organized the schoolhouse, of stolen moments and careful propriety. "You look beautiful," Maria, the boarding house owner's daughter, said as she tucked a white desert flower into Caroline's hair. "Senor Calder will forget how to breathe." Caroline smiled, though her nerves danced like butterflies. "It's not the wedding I imagined as a girl," she admitted. "No white gown, no family gathering, no fear," Maria finished gently. "That is better than any fancy dress. See." She was right. Caroline took a deep breath, thinking of all the nights she'd lain awake in Silver Creek, dreading Thomas Aldrich's visits, planning lessons while her stomach churned with anxiety. This nervousness was different. It sparkled with anticipation rather than dread. Father Francisco appeared in the doorway, his weathered face kind. "It is time, señorita." The church was small, holding perhaps 30 souls when full. Today, it held only a handful: Don Roberto and his wife, Senora Martinez, Miguel from the trading post who'd made the journey specially, and a few others who'd befriended them during their first week. But as Caroline walked down the short aisle, she had eyes only for the man waiting at the altar. Calder stood tall in his best clothes, clean black pants, a white shirt Maria had insisted on pressing, his boots polished to a shine. But it was his expression that stopped Caroline's breath, wonder and love, and something that looked like disbelief, as if he couldn't quite accept this was real. She reached him, and he took her hands. His were steady, calloused from work but gentle in their touch. "You came," he said softly. "Did you doubt? Every morning I wake up thinking I dreamed it all. You, the canyon, this place." He squeezed her hands. "But you're here." "I'm here," she confirmed. "And I'm not going anywhere." Father Francisco began the ceremony in a mixture of Spanish and English, his words rolling over them like a benediction. Caroline barely heard the formal phrases, lost in Calder's eyes, in the solid reality of his presence. When it came time for vows, Calder spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Caroline, I've made a lot of promises in my life, broke most of them, kept some, but this one, this promise to love you, protect you, stand beside you, this one I'll keep till my last breath." Caroline felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Calder, you gave me freedom when I needed it most. But more than that, you gave me choice. I choose you, today and every day after. I promise to love you, to build a life with you, to remind you every day that the past is past and the future is ours." Father Francisco smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife. When Calder kissed her, gentle and sure, the small gathering erupted in celebration. The cantina had prepared a wedding feast, simple fare but plentiful, with guitars playing and children dancing. Caroline found herself swept into the warmth of the community, women teaching her Mexican wedding traditions while men toasted Calder with rough congratulations. As the sun set, they finally escaped to the small house Don Roberto had helped them rent on the edge of town. It wasn't much, 2 rooms with a kitchen and a small courtyard, but it was theirs. "Welcome home, Mrs. Boone," Calder said as he carried her over the threshold. "I like the sound of that," Caroline said,
then laughed.
Though I suppose I'll have to practice writing it. I've been signing Harper for so long.
He set her down gently, his hands lingering on her waist.
Any regrets?
It's not the life you planned.
The life I planned would have killed me slowly,
Caroline said honestly.
This life, our life, makes me feel alive.
They stood in their new home, afternoon light slanting through the windows, dust motes dancing in the golden rays. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and the slow building of their place in this community. But tonight was theirs.
Calder,
Caroline said, suddenly shy.
That promise I made, back in the saloon?
You don't owe me anything.
Caroline never did.
I know. She stepped closer, her hands finding the buttons of his shirt. But what if I want to not from obligation, but from desire? His breath caught. Caroline.
I love you,
she said simply, and I want to show you. Will you let me? Instead of answering with words, he drew her close, kissing her with a passion they'd kept carefully banked during their week of courtship. This was different from their careful kisses before this was claiming and being claimed, promising with touch what they'd already sworn with words. Later, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Caroline traced the scars on Calder's chest by moonlight. Each one told a story, violence survived, pain endured, a life hard lived.
Do they bother you?
He asked quietly. No, they're proof.
Of what?
That you survived, that you're strong enough to protect what matters, that you chose to change, to become the man who saved me. He caught her hand, kissed her palm.
You saved yourself. I just helped.
We saved each other, Caroline corrected, and we'll keep doing it. They talked through the night, making plans and sharing dreams. The school would open next week already. She had 12 students enrolled. Calder would continue working with Don Roberto's horses, but hoped to start his own stable eventually. Maybe they'd have children of their own someday, to fill this little house with laughter. I want to build you a real house, Calder said, something solid, with a proper garden and windows that don't let in dust.
This is perfect,
Caroline assured him.
It's ours. That makes it perfect.
As dawn broke, they stood in their small courtyard, watching the sun paint the mountains. Caroline wore Calder's shirt. He had a blanket wrapped around his waist, and they must have looked thoroughly improper, but there was no one to see, no one to judge.
No more running,
Calder said, pulling her back against his chest.
No more looking over our shoulders. Just us, and whatever we build here.
It feels strange, Caroline admitted. All my life, I've been running from or toward something. Now I'm just here. Good strange or bad strange? The best strange. She turned in his arms. I used to dream about being somewhere else, someone else. Now I can't imagine being anywhere but here, anyone but who I am with you. A rooster crowed somewhere in town, signaling the start of a new day. Soon, Sanctuary would wake. Senora Martinez would expect Caroline at the schoolhouse. Don Roberto would have horses waiting for Calder. Life would resume its rhythm. But for now, they stood in their courtyard, man and wife, survivors and lovers, building a future from the ashes of their pasts. What are you thinking? Calder asked.
That I'm happy, Caroline said, surprised by the simple truth of it. Truly, completely happy. I didn't know it could feel like this.
Like what?
Like home, like peace. Like everything I was searching for was right here, waiting.
She smiled up at him. Waiting in a scarred cowboy with ice blue eyes who wouldn't take what I offered but gave me everything instead. You gave me more. Calder said, you gave me a reason to stop drifting, to believe I could be more than my mistakes. We both can be more, Caroline said firmly. Together, as they went inside to dress for their first full day as husband and wife. Caroline paused at the threshold. This small house, this new life, this unexpected love. It was nothing like the future she'd imagined as a proper schoolteacher in Silver Creek. It was something better. It was chosen. It was earned. It was theirs. And as she watched Calder move through their home, already making it his through small gestures and careful attention, she knew that every hard mile, every moment of fear, every drop of blood had been worth it. They'd crossed more than a border. They'd crossed from their old lives to new ones, from loneliness to love, from running to standing still. And in this little town of second chances, with this man who'd kept his promise and stolen her heart, Caroline had found the greatest freedom of all. The freedom to be herself, completely and without apology, loved for exactly who she was. "Ready for our life?" Calder asked, offering his hand. "Ready," she said, taking it. And together they stepped out into their first day, no longer fugitive and protector, but husband and wife, facing whatever came with the strength of two hearts made one. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after the wedding. Caroline was teaching arithmetic to her students when Don Roberto appeared in the schoolhouse doorway, his weathered face grave. "Senora Boone," he said quietly, "a message came for your husband. The trader says it is urgent." Caroline dismissed her class early, her heart beginning that familiar race of fear. She found Calder at the stable, working with a young stallion. He looked up at her approach, his smile fading when he saw her expression. "What is it?" She handed him the letter. He opened it slowly, his face going stone still as he read. Without a word, he passed it to her. The writing was shaky, feminine. "If you are the same Calder Boone who once rode with Dutch McCready, then you should know Garrett Ward still lives. He's in Tucson, dying slow from consumption. He's been asking for you, says he has words that need speaking before he meets his judgment. Come if you dare. Sarah Ward." Caroline felt the blood drain from her face. "Ward, the man who killed Mary, who I thought died years ago." Calder's voice was flat, controlled, but she could see the storm building in his eyes. "You can't go," Caroline said immediately. "It's across the border. If they still have papers on me, if anyone recognizes you, I have to." He turned away, staring at the mountains. "All these years, I thought he was dead, thought justice had been done, even if I wasn't the one to do it. But if he's alive, it could be a trap." "Probably is." He faced her again, and she saw the war in him, the new man he'd become fighting the old need for vengeance. "But I need to know. Need to hear what he has to say about Mary. Need to see him pay for what he did." Caroline took his hands, feeling them tremble slightly. "We've built something good here. Calder, don't let the past destroy it. What if I can't move forward until I face it?" She studied his face, seeing the torment there. This was the shadow that still woke him some nights, the name he called out in dreams. "Then we go together." "No, absolutely not. I won't risk you." "You think I'd let you face this alone after everything?" She squeezed his hands harder. "We're married. Calder, your ghosts are my ghosts now." They argued through the afternoon, but Caroline held firm, finally, as the sun set. Calder gave in. "We go careful," he said. "Stay off main trails. If anything feels wrong, we turn back." Agreed. They left before dawn the 2 days later, telling everyone they were visiting a horse breeder in Hermosillo. The journey north felt different from their desperate flight south. They were returning to danger by choice now, not running from it. They crossed the border at a different point, where an old smuggler's trail wound through the mountains. No markers here, just Calder's memory and the stars to guide them. They rode in tense silence, both remembering another journey, another time when gunfire and blood had marked their passage. Tucson appeared on the horizon the 4th day, larger than Caroline remembered from her teaching days. They found a boarding house on the outskirts that didn't ask questions, and Calder went to gather information while Caroline waited. He returned, looking grim. "Ward's here." "All right. Doc confirms he's dying. Lungs are shot. He's holed up at his sister's place on the south side." His sister, who wrote the letter. Must be. Question is, why reach out to me now? What's his game? Maybe there is no game. Maybe a dying man just wants to clear his conscience. Calder's laugh was bitter. Ward never had a conscience to clear. They went that evening. As shadows lengthened across the dusty streets, the house was small, respectable, with flowers trying to grow in the desert soil. A woman answered their knock, 30-ish, tired-looking, with eyes that had seen too much. Sarah Ward. You're Boone. It wasn't a question. He's been waiting. Says he won't die until he speaks his piece to you. She led them through a clean but sparse parlor to a back room that smelled of sickness and laudanum. The man in the bed bore little resemblance to Caroline's imagination, thin to the point of skeletal. Skin like old paper. Eyes sunken but still sharp. Calder Boone, Ward wheezed. Took your time. Thought you were dead, Calder said flatly. Would have been happy to keep thinking it. Ward's laugh turned into a coughing fit that brought up blood. When it passed, he gestured weakly at Caroline. This the woman you crossed the border with heard about that. Still playing hero? I see. Say what you need to say. Calder commanded, about Mary. Ward's expression shifted, something almost like regret flickering across his wasted features. Mary, sweet Mary, you want to know how she died? I know how she died. You killed her. No. Ward shook his head weakly. No, I didn't. That's what I needed to tell you. Mary killed herself. Calder took poison rather than stay with me. The room went absolutely still. Caroline saw Calder sway slightly, as if the words were physical blows. You're lying, Calder said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Why would I lie now I'm dying? Boone, got no reason to lie. Ward closed his eyes. I was a bad man, did bad things to her, but I didn't kill her. She did that herself, and her last words were your name. No, Calder's voice broke. She wrote me, said she was happy. I made her write that, thought if you stayed away, she'd eventually accept things. Another coughing fit. But she never did. Kept saying you'd come for her. When months passed and you didn't, he gestured weakly. Caroline watched her husband crumble, saw the moment when the guilt he'd carried for years transformed into something sharper, deeper. She moved to him, took his arm, felt him shaking. I could have saved her, Calder whispered, if I'd just come back. You were hurt, Caroline said firmly. Recovering from where they tried to kill you, you couldn't have. I could have tried harder. Could have. He looked at Ward with naked anguish. Why tell me this now? Because I'm dying angry, Ward admitted. Angry at myself, at the world, at you for being the better man she wanted. Figured the truth would hurt you more than letting you think I murdered her. One last cruelty before I go. Calder moved so fast Caroline couldn't stop him. His hands were around Ward's throat, not squeezing yet, but ready. Give me one reason, Calder growled. One reason not to send you to hell right now. Ward didn't struggle, just met his eyes. Because you're not me, never were. That's why Mary loved you. For a long moment, they stayed frozen. Then Calder released him, stepping back as if burned. Calder, Caroline said softly. He turned and walked out without a word. Caroline looked at the dying man, then at his sister, hovering in the doorway. Was it true? She asked. About Mary? Sarah nodded, tears on her cheeks. I helped nurse her at the end. She talked about him constantly, said he was her redemption, but she couldn't wait anymore. Caroline found Calder in the small garden behind the house, standing among the struggling flowers. He was crying silent tears that seemed wrenched from somewhere deep. It wasn't your fault, she said. Wasn't it I left her with him, knew what he was, and I left her. You were 23 and nearly dead from a knife wound. You did what you could. It wasn't enough.
Caroline turned him to face her. No, it wasn't. And that's a tragedy you'll carry forever. But Calder, listen to me, Mary made her choice. Just like I made mine. She chose to end her pain the only way she knew how. You can't take that agency from her, even in death. I failed her. Yes, but you didn't fail me. You saved me, gave me a life, gave me love. Doesn't that count for something? He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. She held him as he shook with years of suppressed grief, finally able to mourn his sister properly. I want to go home, he said finally. Then we go home. They left Tucson that night, riding under stars that seemed dimmer than before. The journey back to Sanctuary was quiet. Calder lost in thoughts Caroline couldn't reach, but she stayed close, a constant presence, a reminder that he wasn't alone. When they finally saw their little house on the edge of town, both of them exhaled in relief. Home, safety, the life they'd built together. That night, as they lay in their bed, Calder spoke into the darkness. I'll never forgive myself for Mary. I know, Caroline said simply, but you can choose how you carry it. You can let it poison everything, or you can let it remind you to hold tight to what you have now. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I love you, Caroline, more than I thought possible. If I ever lost you, you won't. She pressed closer. I'm not going anywhere. Remember, we survived the desert and gunfights and fevers. We can survive ghosts, too. Promise. I promise. In the morning, life resumed its rhythm. Caroline taught her students. Calder worked with the horses, and slowly, the shadow of Tucson began to fade. Not disappear, some shadows never did, but fade enough to live with. 2 weeks later, Caroline stood in their doorway at twilight, watching Calder work with a young mare in the corral. The horse was skittish, damaged by rough handling, but Calder was patient, gentle, slowly earning her trust. That was his gift, she realized, not the gun skills or the survival knowledge. Though those had saved their lives, his real gift was offering second chances to horses, to desperate women in saloons, to himself. He looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. It wasn't the same smile as before. Tucson, there was a sadness now that would probably never leave, but it was real, and it was hers. She placed a hand on her stomach, where new life was just beginning to grow. She hadn't told him yet, waiting for the right moment. But soon, she'd give him news of the future, of hope, of the family they'd build together. Coming in, she called. In a minute. Just want to get her settled. Caroline smiled, thinking of that first night when he'd promised to get her across the border alive. He'd kept that promise and so many more. Now it was her turn to keep hers to stay, to love him, to build a life worth living. She went inside to start dinner, humming softly. Through the window, she could see Calder with the mare, patient and steady. Beyond him, the mountains stood purple in the twilight, and somewhere a guitar played in the distance. This wasn't the life she'd planned. It was the life she'd chosen, and that made all the difference. Her first night hadn't been a debt paid, but a gift freely given, and every night since had been the same, not obligation, but choice. Not payment, but love. In the corral, Calder got the mare to take sugar from his hand. Caroline smiled, touching her stomach again. Tomorrow she'd tell him about the baby. Tonight, she'd hold him close and remind him that redemption came in many forms, sometimes in the shape of a scared woman in a dusty dress who'd walked into a saloon and changed everything. They'd crossed more borders than the one between countries. They'd crossed from past to future, from alone to together, from running to home. And in this little house on the edge of Sanctuary, two broken people continued the slow, sweet work of healing each other, one day at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts about Caroline and Calder's journey. If you enjoyed this Wild West love story,
Please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these tales of love and redemption in the American frontier. Your support means the world and helps me continue bringing these stories to life. Until next time, partners.